Hey Hayden, how's it going?
How's it going? It's going good.
Let's see. So I have not received you were the one who emailed me, right?
I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay. We have a pretty small turnout for this class. We kind of didn't know how many people would be signing up for the GMAT now that like things are kind of picking back up from the pandemic.
Mm,
And I think I got one email uh and I think we only have 3 students.
it's a small class, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you did you get my message in what's the Canvas?
Oh yeah, that's the thing I was gonna ask you. My Canvas, because I don't go to UCSD,
Hmm.
so I don't know my ID and stuff. And I was trying to figure it out, but if I don't know how to figure it out, like
Okay.
honestly.
I'm not an expert on Canvas. I had to get help setting up the class, just getting that on there. So but you can contact I'll see who you can contact
Okay.
about that because it would they do have a lot of good stuff there. I'll put it that way. And my quizzes are on there and so a lot of the stuff for the course is on there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what I was going to do is once we get you know potentially all 3 of you or however many of you we have, just talk to you guys about how we can structure this because I put it together kind of as a like a class, assuming maybe like 12 to 15. In my other classes, that's usually what we've had, but we can just we can make this a lot more personalized for you guys if we're we've got 3.
Definitely. Yeah. Were we supposed to do something before we got to class today? Because I couldn't check Canvas, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, there were some books to get.
I know the
Hopefully.
book. Yeah, I got the book, but that
Okay.
was like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the GMAT official guide 2021, right?
Um, the 2020 and 2021 are the same, basically
Okay,
identical, and so either one of those is fine. Yeah.
sounds good.
There might be some slight page changes for some of the assignments, like a chapter starts on a different page, but that's about it. Okay, looks like we have Danica. Hello, Danica.
Oh, hey, I'm here. How are
Hi.
you guys?
Good. Um, Danica, did you get my message, my email in Canvas?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So we have potentially one more today who should be showing up, and then we can get started.
Cool. I am trying to get my video to start. I don't know what's wrong with it. It works every day when I'm at work. Of course, not now.
I don't know if you have this problem, but if I was using anything previously, like Skype with video, sometimes it doesn't like let go of the camera. It's like controlling the camera, and then when you try and turn on Zoom or whatever, um, it Zoom can't get access to the camera. I don't know if that's the case, but maybe if you have some of the other programs running, shutting those down might help.
No, we just use Microsoft Teams at work and it works just fine. I'm not
Okay.
sure. I'm gonna try to come back in. Let me see
Okay.
if that works. Okay.
Yeah.
BRB.
Ramon? I see you, Danica.
Yay. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay. Looks like Ramon is having an issue too, so he's signing back in. Ramon?
Hey.
Hi. You're kind of in here twice. Do you want me to remove the first login that you had?
Yeah, that would work. It's just my computer's not letting me in the meeting. So let me see if I can get out.
Okay.
So I had to dial in through my phone.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So this is our class. We're not the largest class I've ever seen, which is good for you guys. So this is, a situation where potentially we can make this more like, kind of private tutoring. I've done both. I've been teaching the GMAT and the GRE for 13 years. They're not identical, but they do overlap. And so we'll go over what the GMAT has and any differences. I don't know. Are you guys familiar with the GMAT? Have you taken it before?
Only like a test.
Okay, a practice
official
GMAT.
Practice, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, practice as well.
Okay, you too, Ramon. Okay, what about you, Hayden?
I've read about it, but I haven't taken a practice test.
Okay, so I'll just quickly go over what's in the GMAT, and then we'll kind of talk. Just get you guys to introduce yourselves. Tell me a little bit about your backgrounds, especially your math background, and get a sense of what the best way forward for you guys is. So I will share my screen. Okay, so the GMAT it's produced by the company they call themselves GMAC. So Graduate Management Admissions Council. So you may see that's just the company that makes the GMAT. It's generally referring to the same thing. All the official GMAT material will come from the GMAC. And there are 4 parts to the test. So part 1 is the analytical writing assessment. And so that's going to be the essay. It's 30 minutes long. And you're scored from 0 to 6 on half-point increments. Now, I will say this, the first 2 sections, the analytical writing and the integrated reasoning, I'll talk about those in a second, but those are typically less important than the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. So in your study, and then in the emphasis that we'll put on these, we're going to spend less time on analytical writing and less time on integrated reasoning. The way I would put it is that you want to have a good score on those, but maximizing your score is not as important. So the integrated reasoning is also 30 minutes long. It's scored 1 to 8 and also in increments. And the analytical writing is an essay. Well, integrated reasoning is, oh, did we lose Ramon again? Yep. Or no, is he switching over?
I think, yeah, I'm trying to switch over.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So the integrated reasoning is basically reading graphs and charts and data and answering questions about those. So I'll just call that data analysis. Again, these two are the first things that you do on the test, but they're not as heavily weighted by graduate schools or by MBAs. Then we get to verbal reasoning. And there are 3 parts to this. We've got sentence corrections. And then have all of you taken either the SAT or the ACT?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The English section of the ACT or the writing and language section of the SAT, that, especially the older SAT, but still the recent SAT as well, that kind of correcting grammar, that's what sentence corrections are. So I'll just put grammar here. We also have reading comprehension. That's kind of straightforward, right? You'll read a passage and then answer some questions about it. And then critical reasoning. So this will be questions like, which of the following would strengthen the author's argument, or which of the following would weaken the author's argument? So reading comprehension is, did you understand what's in the passage? Critical reasoning is, after you understand what's in the passage, can you apply it to a broader concept? And so those are the 3 components of the verbal reasoning, and then we have quantitative reasoning. And I should put in here, for the verbal reasoning, it's, let's see, 65 minutes. And you're scored between 6 and 51, and there are 36 questions. And then for the quantitative reasoning, also scored 6 through 51. This one's the longest though, or second longest, I should say, 62 minutes and 31 questions. So the quantitative reasoning is typically the part that most people consider the most intimidating, the one that they spend the most time working on. There are 2 basic question types. You have problem solving and this is going to be similar to what you guys have done in other standardized math tests. So you'll be answering questions, multiple choice, find the answer. The questions may be tougher than what you're used to, but the format will be fairly similar. So then the other one is data sufficiency. And this one we're going to spend a decent amount of time on. Data sufficiency requires that you kind of retrain yourself a little bit in how you approach questions, because it's not just about finding the right answer. And a lot of times it's not even about finding the right answer. It's about being able to say whether or not you can find an answer. And so that's where the data sufficiency comes from. You'll get a prompt, and then you'll get statement 1, statement 2, and they'll ask you, is statement 1 sufficient to find an answer to the prompt? Is statement 2 sufficient to find an answer to the prompt? Is neither sufficient? Or is it the combination of the 2 that's sufficient? So it's okay if what I just said doesn't make a ton of sense to you guys, but data sufficiency takes a lot of practice to get used to think in those terms. And so we are going to spend a good chunk of time on that. So the next thing I want to cover is computer adaptive. A computer adaptive test, what that means. Do you guys have any idea? Have you heard of what that means?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions, you answer them right.
Yeah. So the GMAT is computer adaptive. It is the most aggressively adaptive of the tests. So every question that you answer helps determine the next question you get. So generally, if you get a question right, the next question within that section will be more difficult. You'll get a harder question. Get a question wrong, you'll get an easier one. So there are a few things that because of that you want to keep in mind. You can't skip. You don't want to skip a question. Now, it's possible you may look at a question and say, you know what, I could sit here for 45 minutes and I wouldn't be able to answer this. You make your best guess and you move on. However, it is going to affect your score. Your score, let's say that we're just talking about the verbal section. Your score isn't just determined by the number of questions you get right, but also by the difficulty of the questions that you answered. And so if you absolutely can't answer a question, you make your best guess and then you move on. But you can't skip questions and come back. It doesn't allow you to do that. And so you want to make your best guess. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's a psychological thing that sometimes happens when you miss a question and you know that it's going to affect your the immediate next question. That can throw some people in a little bit of a tailspin, and it's okay as long as you're ready for it, and that if that happens, you can deal with it. Like, that's something where, okay, let's take a break. I can feel the anxiety rising. I'm worried that, this is going to snowball. If you miss 2 in a row, oh my gosh, the world's ending. Now, the world won't be ending, but that doesn't mean you won't feel that way. It's important that when you're in that situation, you take a step back, you take a deep breath, kind of close your eyes, mentally reset a little bit, and get back in there. With other tests that aren't computer adaptive, or with tests that are computer adaptive, but they're adaptive by section, not by question, it's not as like an urgent a feeling. So it's just important that you're ready for that. Okay. So that's kind of the background of the GMAT, the overall structure. What I'd like to do now is just have you guys introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about why you're signed up for the class, when you're planning on taking the GMAT, and what your goals are. And then I'll kind of ask you some questions too. It's always helpful to know a little bit about your math background and some things like that. So Hayden, I have you first on my list. So tell us a little bit about your situation.
Okay. Well, I go to University of Alabama. I'm going to be a junior, and my major is mechanical engineering. And the reason I'm taking the GMAT is because I'm in a program called the STEM Path to the MBA at University of Alabama. Mm-hmm. And I can get my MBA in only a year after my undergrad. So because of that program, I have to take it to get into the actual program. Even though I'm in the program, I have to take it to still get into the graduate school. And also it counts as scholarship money. So depending on how well I do, I get more scholarship money for it. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, great. How much math So you said it's for engineering. So you have a pretty strong math background.
Yeah, mechanical engineering. So
Yeah. Mhm.
I've already done all my math, so I'm pretty far.
Okay. And you said that you haven't taken the test, but you've looked at some of the material.
Yeah, I've been looking because I have the book, so I was just reading it today, and so I've been looking through it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. With students in your situation, one thing that I would point out is that sometimes the first couple times they're taking the quantitative section, they're disappointed in their score, and it's important not to like feel bad about that. The way I like it is that the math that let's say that's like indoor volleyball, and then you go to play like beach volleyball, and you think like, well, why am I not playing as well as I thought? The skills do transfer, but it's not immediate. Like sometimes it takes a little transition period, right? Like jumping on a wooden floor is different than indoors, different than outdoors on sand, and so you just be aware that there might be that adjustment. It doesn't mean all of a sudden that you're bad at math. It just means you're kind of playing a slightly new game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Danica, how about your background here?
Sure. So I graduated from Penn State in 2011 with an econ degree. So it's
Mhm.
been a minute
Okay.
since school.
But you did have to do some math.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of the math was econometrics, so above algebra, but not quite like the reasoning behind it,
Okay.
which I'm a little bit nervous about. So when you talked about it earlier, I was like, okay, we're definitely have to go over that. So I'm excited. It's been, like I said, it's been about 10 years since I graduated. So I
Okay.
need to
bit of rest.
relearn. Yeah. Relearn a bunch of that stuff.
Mhm.
I currently work for Liberty Mutual, been here 6 years. I want to take the GMAT to do a career change.
Mhm.
So I'm in insurance now. I want to move to finance.
Are you in underwriting?
No, I'm in customer service. I'm in like the billing.
Okay. I was wondering what someone with an econ degree do at an insurance company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mesh. So that's why
So
I'm
that's why
looking.
looking to
Yeah.
do something else. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And when are you planning on taking it?
I'm right after this class, hopefully, to get like the first one in, but I've sort of mentally accounted for taking it at least twice. But the program that I'm looking for, they're all based in Europe, and I'm looking for like a September intake. So anytime between taking the test, anytime between after this and the rest of the year. So like the next like 6 months.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That sounds good. Oh, and then Hayden, when were you planning on taking yours?
I'm taking it because I have to take it before November, but I signed up. I think it's like August 5th or something. So like right after this class ends.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And Ramon, tell us a little bit about your background when you're planning on taking the test, what you're looking to do with in graduate or MBA programs.
Yeah. So I'm signed up for August 15th, but
Mhm.
similar to Danica, I'll also be taking it a second time, I imagine.
It's good to have that at least mentally, because then you
Yeah.
don't feel like, oh, this is my last test. If I don't do well, it's a
Right.
disaster. Yeah.
So I'll probably end up taking that either late September, early October.
hmm
And then my background is in chemical engineering. So math is, not necessarily a weakness for me, but on the GMAT sure feels like it. And then
Yeah. So you're the outdoor or the indoor volleyball player who's on the beach now. Yeah.
yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah.
I took the practice exam and I would like to think I was an Olympic level indoor volleyball player, and then I got real humbled real quick when I did the practice, right? So
Yeah.
and then with what I want to do with an MBA, so I work in genetics, so DNA sequencing.
Oh, that's really cool.
I work as a researcher,
Uh-huh.
and I would really like to take my technical skill set and go do more of product management kind of thing. So
Mhm.
meshing the commercial and the technical side. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think it's pretty interesting that all three of you have strong math backgrounds. I think that that's a good thing, because the possibility, like, if one of you had a really strong math background and the other two didn't, then it would be kind of harder to juggle everything. But I think it's nice that all three of you have a strong math background. I think we'll be able to get to some higher level stuff a little bit faster. And so I think, Ramon, you were the one who said that you had signed up for Target Test Prep.
Yeah, so I've been doing
Okay.
that currently.
So I can give you guys a little bit of background on it. I'm not up on the latest pricing, and I know they have like discounts at different times, but I know a lot of people who've done their program. And so what Target Test Prep does for their GMAT program is they have a pretty comprehensive set of problems for basically every kind of problem that you're going to have on the GMAT. I wouldn't say that their questions are perfectly GMAT-like, but that's okay, because the goal of those is to get you ready to do GMAT questions, not necessarily to replace them for you. And for a lot of people, like starting a little more fundamentally so you can build your way up, that's pretty helpful. I know they've recently added some verbal component stuff. The feedback I've seen is that it's not bad, but it's not quite as polished as the quant stuff, just because it's newer. They haven't iterated on it enough. I think it came out in like February or something like that. So I think it'll still be helpful, but from what I've seen, and I did look at their stuff a little bit. I don't think that production values are the most important thing, and it doesn't have crazy high production values, but the point is to give you good lessons and good questions, and from what I've seen, it does a pretty good job there. So as far as a supplement to this, I don't think it's a bad option. There are other options too that I'll go over with you guys. There will be enough to where no matter what you want to do, you'll have a lot of like avenues for good practice, for good questions, for going over stuff. So it's important not to feel overwhelmed, like, oh, I have to use all of this. I'm just going to show you guys a bunch of stuff. You can try things out and see what you like. I'll give you an honest assessment of them. And so then you can kind of mix and match and see what you want to do. So this is probably a good time to get into that. So we can start with Target Test Prep that we just talked about. Ramon, do you know how much they charge for the program? Is it like 180 for a couple months or something?
Yeah, so you can do it where you pay month to month, so it's $99 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Right now you get the quant and the verbal for free, or you get the verbal with the quant. So you pay for the quant, you get the verbal, and then it's $300 a month, or 300 for 4 months.
Okay. Okay, so that's an option. Of the paid options, I would put Target Test Prep above, say, like Kaplan or Princeton Review. I would put Target Test Prep above those. So they also have a nice formula sheet. And it's a little PDF. Maybe not super little. It's not. It's about 15 pages. And what I'll do is I'll put that in our documents folder so that you guys can take a look at it. And it covers all of the formulas that you need to know. Now, it's important to realize, like, you're not going to do well on the GMAT just by looking at the formulas and making sure you know them. But that's the first step, right? Like, you need to know the formulas before you can do the questions. Then you can start working on questions. So if there are any formulas that you look at and you're like, I don't remember this, I don't know this, that's a good place to start, at least to see what you need to brush up on. Reddit has a pretty solid form there, so it'd be RGMAT. Students will go on there and post questions. They'll post things about the GMAT. Sometimes they'll just complain about the GMAT, which is fine. Sometimes people need to vent. It's a pretty good resource for GMAT stuff. There is a little bit of a target test prep kind of fanboy club that goes on in there, where you would think that they are the only thing that matters in GMAT prep based on the subreddit there, but they're not too bad. And otherwise it's a pretty useful place. So I would definitely recommend considering going to the GMAT subreddit. GMAT Prep Club. So I'll pull up their website, but GMAT Prep Club is probably the best source for explanations to official questions that you can find. And so one of the things I'll recommend is if you are doing an official question from, let's say, our official guide or one of the GMAC official tests, and you're stuck on it, the best thing you can do is Google, in quotation marks, GMAT Prep Club, and then like the first 6 or 7 words of the question that you're doing. So you would just type that in, right? Like if a machine is on for X hours, you would just type in GMAT Prep Club if a machine is on for X hours, end quotation mark. You type that in, you will most likely pull up that question, and then you can go to the website there, and then you can see the explanation for the question. And not just one. What they do is they have multiple explanations that come up, and then the ones that are considered the best are upvoted, so they'll be the highest up, like directly under the question. And so it's a great resource for pretty much any official question. They also have it for some of the non-official questions, but I would put it this way. Official questions are higher quality. They're more like the actual GMAT than the other materials. So if at all possible, stick to official stuff. Now, if you're working on fundamentals, there's nothing wrong with like Manhattan Prep or Target Test Prep. But when you're trying to do GMAT questions, there are enough official GMAT questions that you should try to do those extensively. Let's see. We also have, so again, GMAC, the company that makes the GMAT, they have some official materials, right? They have the official guide that we're using for this course. They have the advanced questions book. And what this is this is a collection of the most difficult verbal and quant based questions. And so let's say that you're shooting for a really high score, above a 700. This is a good book to pick up. It just has quant and verbal reasoning, so it doesn't have any analytical writing prompts or integrated reasoning. But again, the verbal and the quant are the most important. So this is a good resource for getting tougher questions if you're really trying to max out your score. And then might as well talk about this right now. Some of you may have the 2022 and some of you may have the 2021. The questions did not change at all. Some of the pages may be slightly different, but they're going to be the same. So what's in here is the same thing as what's in the 2021. I know there were some shipping issues. I think wherever these were being produced, there was an issue getting them shipped through Amazon. And so there was a delay for the 2021, I think, and some of the others. So if you weren't able to get the 2021, the 2022 works just as well. And so this does have practice for every part of the test. And then it also comes with a mobile app and then an online question bank so that you can do more questions that way. So with this official guidebook, you're going to have a lot of questions to work through. And so I would strongly recommend that you stick to the official material as much as possible, especially since you've already purchased the official guide. And then the GMAC does have practice tests. And what's nice about these is that they're free. There are 2 free ones. and they are computer adaptive, which means you can get different questions. The question bank that they draw from, that each one draws from, is pretty large. So you could take them more than once and get either almost entirely or pretty close to entirely different questions. So we've got 2 free ones. I
Like,
think
would you-
they're, go ahead.
I say, would you say it'd be worthwhile? Because I know you have the option of buying. Yeah, there's like you can buy 4 more that are.
It might be, yeah, it might be 4. They keep
Yeah,
adding on new ones. I would say this: the most underrated part of preparing for a test like this is redoing questions that you missed, because it doesn't feel like progress in the same way that doing new questions does. You do new questions, you do a new test, you get a new score. Like, it feels like you're making progress, whereas going back over old questions doesn't feel that good. It can be boring, it can be kind of slow, but it's really important. What I would say is that you would get more progress out of doing the 2 free tests more than once, reviewing and redoing all your missed questions, working through everything in here, and doing nothing else than if you were to do the 2 free ones, the 4 paid ones, this, and then a couple other resources, but going through them like once. And just because the retention that you get isn't as high.
Mhm.
And so let's go over that. Let's say that you, well, actually, yeah, this will tie in with us going through GMAT Prep Club. So I'm going to pull that page up and just show you guys how it looks.
And I would imagine if you like repeat some of the tests, as you're getting different ones right and wrong, you're essentially getting different tests every time, right?
Yes, there will be some overlap questions, but yes. And but what I would say, an important thing that for you to do is to redo questions without notes in front of you and see if you can work your way all the way through from beginning to end and get it right. If you can't do that, you don't really know the question that you're working on. So let me share my screen here. So if you just Google GMAT Prep Club, you can get in here, and then you can search within that. But let's go here. Actually, let's get right to the question banks. So I'll share this with you guys too. This is a really good resource. So if you want to look up a specific question, like I said, you would Google it, right? You do GMAT Prep Club space, type in the first 6 or 7 words of the question, put that entire thing in quotation marks, enter, and it'll take you to the page. However, if you want to look up a certain type of question, let's say that you want to do data sufficiency questions, and you want them difficult but not too difficult, and you want to work on combinations, you can click these in and then go down to the bottom. And let's say you want to stick to official sources only. So we go to source official guide. So far we've chosen data sufficiency, difficulty 600 to 700 level, combinations, official guide, search. So we're so specific that it looks like there's only one of these. But this is what you would pull up. Bowls X and Y each contained exactly 2 jelly beans, each of which was either red or black. So then we get our entire question. You can start a timer that'll keep track of how long it takes you. And then you can choose your answer. And then once you register, you have to create an account in order to see the answers. But then you can go down here if you want and see the explanations. And so the highest voted explanations will be at the top here. And so this is really useful for, let's say that, there's one specific type that's giving you trouble, or you've exhausted kind of all the medium stuff and you want something that's really difficult. So let's do problem solving 700 level, and let's do probability, and then official guide. And so then you can give yourself these questions here too. This is really helpful for saying, like let's say that you went through a question and it gave you some trouble. You feel like you understand it, but you aren't sure. Well, you want to test yourself by redoing it, but you shouldn't redo it right away because you'll remember what the answer is. Like you'll just remember what the numbers are. So you give yourself about a week, come back to it and redo it. Well, what can you do in the meantime? You can try to find questions that are similar to it. So you won't necessarily want to do this for every single topic or every single type of question, but it is useful if there's one that you feel like you really want to strengthen. So let's talk about what you can do to save that. What I like to do is if there's a question here that I'm working on and I missed it, you just on Windows, you do Shift Windows S. It allows you to do a screenshot. You cut and paste it. And then you can paste it into PowerPoint. There are different places. You could paste it into like a PNG or like image file. But if you do something like this, okay, now we can create a list of all the questions that we missed and save those for later and then come back to them and work on them. This is what I do with my tutoring students as well. It's really important that just because you missed a question and you went over it doesn't mean that you've mastered it. You want to be able to come back and redo it. So I'll quickly go through what the verbal offers here too. So we talked about the quantitative stuff. If you look over here, we also have reading comprehension, sentence correction, critical reasoning. So all the main verbal and quantitative question types are covered here. And again, we have difficulty stuff up here. We have topics. Now for the reading comprehension, splitting them into business, humanities, social science, that's just what the passages are about. I don't find that extremely helpful. For sentence correction, this is pretty helpful. We have all the different things that you're tested on. Poor quality, this just means you shouldn't look at it. It was a poorly constructed question. Critical reasoning, we have the different concepts that you're going to be tested on. And so you have difficulty level kind of at the top. In the middle, you have the question type. And then at the bottom, it starts going through the source. Again, on the sources, I would stick to the official guides as much as possible. You will see that they do include some target test prep stuff. They also have like Kaplan and Magoosh. I would say of those third parties, I would put target test prep towards the top and then Manhattan up there too. And then after that, I'd put everything else kind of lower down. Typically what someone like Kaplan or Princeton Review does is they hire someone to make their material and they pay someone like $25 an hour. So they get a tutor who's, not that great, who's okay, but they're the ones who put it together. And so it's not going to be an amazing job. And so the target test prep people, the Manhattan prep people, they're generally going to have higher quality material. So between all those sources, there's a lot. There's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can work on. And again, I would say that it's more important to make sure that you master the stuff you're going over than to just try and do like 1,000 problems. Okay. Let me see if I can pull up the. So I'm gonna pull up the PDF for target test prep. There are a couple things on there that I would want you guys to understand about it as well. Okay. So if you guys can see right now, some of this stuff's pretty simple, right? Like common denominators, adding fractions for common denominators. So some of this you'll say like, okay, yeah, I got it. Dividing fractions, converting fractions to a percent. So this early stuff you probably are thinking, okay, that's pretty easy. Some of this may be a situation where you kind of know the rule, but you have to stop and think about it. And you may think to yourself, okay, well, I need to speed up a little bit. So they may ask you questions about evens versus odds, and you want to learn your rules for that. But typically what I would do for something like these is I would just have little tests in my head if I'm not sure. Like, let's say that, for whatever reason I forgot, I wasn't sure what an odd plus an odd is. Well, 1 plus 1 will tell you. It comes out even. Okay. The odds and the evens have consistent rules that you can apply. So as long as you can think up an example, it'll carry forward. Difference of squares. So this may be a rule that you guys look at and say, oh yeah, that's easy. I know that one. Some of these are more about recognition. And what I mean by that is if you see x squared minus 1, you need to know, oh, that's a difference of squares. Because yeah, if I tell you, that it's x minus 1 times x plus 1, you'd say, okay, yeah, I agree. But you have to be able to recognize it from when you see it here. And so that's why they're showing you some different examples. And if you miss a question, you want to ask yourself, did I know the math concepts? Okay, maybe you did. Did I recognize when I was supposed to use the math concepts? That's what you want to pay attention to. Since all three of you have a pretty strong math background, I suspect recognition is going to be the biggest issue. So when you see a question set up, do you recognize what they're asking of you? And so when you're taking your notes or you're going over a mistake, just make sure that that's something that you're assessing. Knowing the primes less than 100, I think you're probably going to be good with like these. They just, a lot of them, you typically don't go much higher than that. And even if you do, you can kind of just count your way up and make sure, okay, no evens, no multiples of 3. And that gets rid of most of the ones that you have to worry about anyway. And then you just check maybe like multiples of 7s or, 7, 11, and then you're pretty much good. And 5. The divisibility rules, these are worth knowing pretty well. They're also not hard. For the number property questions, this is an important thing to know. The GMAT is, I would say, unusual in that you don't get a calculator. On the SAT, on the ACT, and the GRE, so all the other major standardized tests, you have a calculator. You will not have one for the GMAT, which means you want your calculation skills to be pretty sharp. So anytime you're doing these, you don't want to use a calculator. If for some reason you really want to check your work, that's okay. But you should be you should be working on your mental math skills. And so there are different resources for that. There are a few different ones. I don't know that there's one that I would recommend as the best. And so that's a hard one to give recommendations for. But as you're doing these questions, you're going to get a lot of practice for those. And if you notice, hey, there's some multiplication factors that I've forgotten. Okay, well, maybe then that's something you can work on. Or adding 3-digit numbers. There are different things that you can do. You just want to pay attention to anything that you in particular might be rusty on. So the divisibility rules, Let's see. This is really important. But we, in a later class, we're going to go through this in more depth because it is extremely important. So we're going to go through a lot of these rules, but like as they pertain to actual questions. And so the word translation stuff, we're going to definitely spend time on that. That's really important. Different ways to express a ratio. This is important. This is important. I would say this, the Venn diagram group set stuff, there aren't as many questions of that, and then same with combinations and permutations, as you will be led to believe. A lot of the prep books have a lot of those questions in there, where students really obsess about them and ask a lot of questions about them. It's more because they're scary. It's not really a great representation of their, frequency of occurrence. So you do want to know them, but don't necessarily worry about solving every permutation or Venn diagram problem that you run across. I would say the geometry stuff here is typically more important. You'll notice there's no trig, right? The type of math that you're going to be asked to do is difficult and clever before pre-calculus level math questions. So a lot of like algebra 1, some algebra 2, some geometry, but not easy versions of those questions, right? Like difficult, clever, tricky versions of those questions. And here's some more geometry. Of the geometry stuff, you really want to make sure that you've mastered the triangle and circles. The other stuff is important, but not as important as triangles and circles. They'll keep coming back to that. There's some 3D volume stuff that comes up. Yeah, that's about it. So this PDF here, I'll upload this after the class, but it's worth looking through just so that you have a sense of kind of what you're expected to know. And the next thing I want to show you guys is the concept frequency. The questions that you guys get, again, if you're, kind of looking for questions on the internet or you're looking at what people are studying, they tend to focus on the things that are the most scary and not necessarily the things that are the most common. So if we look at this does give us a good breakdown. I've looked at other kind of collections of the question types, and they're all about the same. So there isn't a ton of disagreement here. And so if we look at this, that's a lot of word problems, right? That's a lot of being able to turn words into math. Integer properties and arithmetic, that's a big one too. We have algebra, percents, ratios, fractions, two-dimensional geometry. So this is the triangle stuff, the circle stuff, the angles, right? Like x plus y adds up to 180, that kind of stuff. Two-dimensional statistics. This is things like mean and median, range. And then after that, we start getting pretty small, right? Again, it's not, we're not saying don't study these at all, but just keep in mind, like the bulk of what you want to be working on is it's the concepts that are going to be most tested. So what I would like to do is to start looking at data sufficiency with you guys. Because again, part of this is going to be something like a mental shift in how you approach the questions. However, do you guys have a math review on page 17 of your official guides?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the math review is something that you guys should work through. It's not too long. It does cover basically all the foundations of the stuff that we've been talking about. And so it'll help refresh your memory. It'll help you know which things you need to work on. And so that's something that you want to start with. So data sufficiency on 254. And I will share my screen. So there is a strategy. Let's see if we can just put together a quick question here. So we'll look at an easy one here. What is the, this is on page 261. Number of pages of a certain journal article. And is this the same one for you guys, right? Number 263 on page 261.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's on page 230, but 260. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have the 2021 version.
Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Okay, it's on page 230.
230.
Okay.
With the answer. That's like the answer key section.
Yeah, is that what we're looking at?
Oh, so it might be farther back then.
We have the question there.
Okay. All right. Well, we're just kind of going through it to show you guys how data sufficiency works. So it's not a big deal if you can see the answer. And also, these are easy questions. So when we get to the hard ones for a couple practice rounds, we'll have you guys look at the questions without the answer. So the size of each page is 5.5 inches by 8 inches. And then statement 2 is the average number of words per page is 250. And so what is the number of pages of a certain journal article? We need to know the number of pages. The size of each page is 5.5 inches by 8 inches. Does that allow us to know the number of pages? No. And what about the average number of words per page is 250? No. So the way we would do this, you basically have A, B, C, D, E. A means statement 1 is sufficient. B means statement 2 is sufficient. C means that both together are sufficient. So A means statement 1 only. B means statement 2 only. C means both together. D means each alone. And E means neither. So we'll say together insufficient. So after a while, the kind of A, B, C, D, E process will get a little bit more natural for you. It's going to just take a little bit of practice. But the process just goes, okay, you look at 1, you look at 2, you see if either of them are sufficient on their own, you see if they're sufficient together, and then we can go from that, right? So what would be the answer to this one?
E.
E.
Yeah, we need more. What could we get? What would we be able to get? And we could answer this.
You can get like how many words the total the article is, and then
Yeah.
just divide the total words by the average per page. And
So
you
if
get
they
a-
gave us the, yeah, total words, if they gave us the total words, so what is the number of pages in a certain journal article? And then they gave us total words. What would our answer be in that case? Would it be A, B, C, D, or E?
It'd be B.
E.
Right, because 1 doesn't help us in that case, right? Okay, good. How about this? How could we make it so that the answer is A?
The total. Oh, I guess it'd be something around the lines of like the total area of the book or of the pages, right? So
Yeah, the
that's
total
the
area of
area.
all the pages. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say total page area. Good, right? Because then we can use that each page is 5.5 by 8 inches, find the area of that one page, and then divide the total page area by the area per page. Yep, good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So for because this tripped me up, I bought like a quant book before taking this class. And I was a little confused about both together and each alone. So both together, does that mean that they both have to happen at the same time for it to work? Or is it just saying,
So
are they reliant on each other in order for it to like fit?
for C to be true, you need both of them together. They don't work individually, they only work together. So they each give you like a piece of what you need. Whereas D is that 1 does it on its own and 2 can do it on its own.
Right. That made sense. But for C to work, like they both have to be reliant on each other.
Yeah.
In order for it to work.
For C, they each provide a part
right.
that together solves it. And for D, they're each sufficient on their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Let's see if we can find. So what quant book did you use?
I think it was just like a basics thing. It was through, I'm not sure.
I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the books, so if you wanted to run it by me, I can tell you.
Okay. Let me find it real quick. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just got the Manhattan Prep Foundations of Math.
Okay, great. Now, does it look like that?
This one, yep.
Yeah. I'm familiar with this book too.
How many do you have? Do you just have every single one?
Almost. Not
Like,
not every
do my
year,
job. Yeah.
but you just want to see like what's the best stuff for your students, you know, and you kind of have hope that the new edition will be better than the last one, and sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not. But that Foundations of Math is excellent for people whose math foundations are not strong. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use it. What I'm
Mhm.
saying is you'll probably outgrow it fairly
Okay.
quickly. And the other thing I would say is there's a temptation sometimes to to stick in um the math that's easy for you to do, that you have success on, that feels good, that doesn't
Mhm.
feel like you've been beat up after a session, but that's not how you're going to grow and improve.
Right.
So don't spend too much time there.
Okay.
But if there's stuff you need to review or there's stuff you need to get some reps in, that's probably the best foundations book for GMAT.
Yeah, that's why I bought it, because
Yeah.
it had been so long since I've been in school. So I was like, I just need a refresher.
Yeah, and there will probably be some chapters where you want to do a lot. You want to do
Mhm.
most of a chapter, and then there will be other chapters where you're like, yeah, this isn't a big deal. I
Yeah.
don't need to do much here. Yeah. So, but that's a good foundations book. Let's start with this. Of the verbal, which, between critical reasoning, reading comprehension, and sentence corrections, which of those three are you guys kind of looking to make the most improvements in? And it's okay to say, I don't know.
Probably reading comprehension, honestly.
Reading comprehension. Okay.
Same.
Okay. So let's look at some reading comprehension. I have,
So one thing that I've actually had people tell me is that, not to say that don't focus on reading comprehension, but you can only get so much better at reading comprehension rather than like the amount of growth that you can do focusing on like sentence correction and the other aspects.
that is a fair statement, if not taken to the extreme.
Right.
Yeah, one way to put it is, can you improve your grammar a lot by learning some rules? Yes. Right. And so sentence corrections, that can go up a lot. Critical reasoning, it depends. If your underlying reading comprehension is pretty good, getting used to critical reasoning can improve your skills a lot. And then for reading comprehension, there's some stuff that's kind of slow going, where it might just be like, someone who's read a lot more every year for 10 years is going to have just a larger kind of exposure to different things, to having read different things. And so that is a pretty big advantage, and it's not something you can fix in 2 months or whatever.
Right.
However, there's a lot that you can learn about breaking down question choices, like answer choices, and seeing where the tricks are, seeing where they can try and twist things to make an incorrect answer look correct, or a correct answer look vague enough to where you're not sure whether it's right or not.
Right.
There are some strategies that we can talk about for finding the part of the passage that has the text in it you need. So there's a lot to do, yes, but they weren't entirely wrong when they said there's typically more room for growth in the other things.
Got it.
Yeah, and some of that's individual too, right? Like,
Mhm.
it kind of just depends on where your own skill level is at and your experience level.
Right.
But the biggest gains typically come from either quant or sentence correction.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. So what I will do, I have the PDF of of the GMAT book, but from a different year. They're not always helpful in giving the online versions. So I'll pull that up. Okay. So I have the 2019 version. Let's take a look at some reading comprehension and go through that together. Where does your reading comprehension chapter start?
So the actual chapter starts at 323 for me, which is the 2021 edition.
323. Okay.
And then the first set of questions is around 334.
Okay. So let's take a look at 334 and let me know.
So it would be question 503 on mine.
Okay.
Hey, this is it. This is it.
Okay. 503.
Yeah.
And does it start with this passage? Scientists of lung.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, it's so annoying that they just move pages around just so they can charge you for a new year.
The racket.
Yeah. Well, I heard that the 2021 to 2022 is the biggest ripoff because they'll take like 12 questions out of the old one and put in 12 new ones or something like that. Just a little bit, just so they can say it's new. And they didn't even do that for this year. Yeah, so let's see. So I'd like you guys to read this passage, and then we'll talk about kind of how to break it down and how to look at the answer choices here. Okay. So if we are reading a passage like this, once you get the idea that it's a science passage, there's a pretty standard formula that the science passages will follow. And so it'll be something like there's kind of an old theory, belief, and then you'll have a new discovery, or experiment, and it'll lead to an update. So that update might completely overturn the old theory. It might slightly amend it. it can, you can have different varying levels of how much it changes. But that's typically the way these work. So once you realize you're reading a passage about science, whether it's, chemistry, biology, physics, something along those lines, just be prepared for that kind of structure. And if we read this passage with that kind of structure in mind, we have kind of an old theory and then a new theory, and there's something in between that changed people's minds or updated their beliefs. What would we say is going on here? And again, we don't necessarily have to be experts in the hypothalamus or the suprachiasmatic nuclei, right? You could just treat those as like, that's just a word. I don't know what that word means. That's okay. It's just a word. But it does say something about those words. So what's going on in this passage?
It's, at least in the first half, it's like introducing, the theory behind the SCNs. And how they worked. And then the second half is kind of saying, well, that does exist and we still believe in that. We've actually found that there are external cues that will regulate circadian rhythms.
Yeah. So we've got our old theory. And then we have new evidence, right? Studies have demonstrated. Let's use a better color. So other stuff. And then we've got, let's see. Oh, no, that's not disagreeing yet. That's just supporting. And then when we're looking for the disagree, right? So how did I know that we're getting to the part where there's a new discovery or a new experiment or some sort of change or contrast?
I would assume it's just by the break of the paragraph. I'm sure that's a thing they do.
That's a good assumption. It's not entirely wrong. What I would say is a new paragraph means there has to be some sort of change, right? But
Yeah.
I get really suspicious when I see this transition word. However, although, nevertheless, things like that imply some sort of contrast, that's a good clue that now we're seeing the shift. So we have new info, right? So we see our old theory, we see our new info. And now what we're looking for is like, what's the new, what's the update? And if we look at this while here, so while scientists do not dispute the role of SCNs in controlling core functions, scientists now believe, oh, this sounds like an update, right? Now believe that circadian clocks in other organs and tissues may respond to external cues other than light. So we have our update. If you can come away from reading a passage with just this, you're in pretty good shape. The goal of reading a passage is not to memorize the entire passage so that when you look at questions, you can answer every single question without going back. The goal is to get a big picture sense of what's going on and to have some idea of where things are, so that when you do need to go back and look, you know approximately where to look. You're not just starting over, like rereading the passage for every single question. You can be intelligent about your search. Okay, so we kind of have a general sense of it. And then they ask us the primary purpose of the passage. So let's go through some of the answer choices here. Challenge recent findings that appear to contradict earlier findings. Now, it's important not only that we're good at getting right answers, but that we're also good at kicking out the wrong answers, because sometimes the way that you get to the right answer isn't that you love the right answer, it's that you can kick out all the others and what's left behind is the best one. So what do you guys think about this? We're gonna pick at every word or every part of this choice. Challenge recent findings that appear to contradict earlier findings. What do you guys think about this?
Not bad.
Is it?
It's
if
not
we're-
challenging though. Is if I'm reading that answer correct, it's basically saying they gave us some update to a previous thing,
Yeah.
but the paragraph, or they're saying that they're challenging the new one.
So yeah, I don't think they're challenging recent findings.
Right.
It sounds like they're agreeing with the recent findings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I don't see any old findings that are being challenged either. So there is a challenge going on. There are recent findings, but the recent findings aren't the thing that's being challenged.
Right.
Does that make sense? So it's like all the parts of a correct answer are in A, but they mix them up a little bit to see if they can trick us. So challenging recent findings? No, it's not. The recent findings are here and there is no challenge to them. What about present two sides of an ongoing scientific debate?
There's really no debate.
Yeah.
You're right. Why did they put this answer choice in here?
Someone might interpret that, you know, you're presenting two theories or two
Mhm.
topics, or two theories, and they might interpret as that being a debate, even though it's not really. They're not challenging one or the other.
Yeah, if there's like an old belief and an updated belief, then they might go, oh, well, that's two things, right? Maybe there's a debate between the two things. Not really, right? Like they're not being presented as alternatives to each other. There's the old way and then there's the new way in light of this new evidence. So yeah, good. Now, we're looking at easy questions just because I want you guys to see the process. It doesn't mean every question will be this easy, but the procedure, the technique that you apply is pretty much the same. It's just that it'll get a little bit harder as you're working on harder ones. So we've challenged recent findings, nope. Present two sides, nope. Report answers to several questions that have long puzzled researchers.
Doesn't talk about anybody being puzzled, right? In the passage, there's no, like, they're certain about what they're talking about, so it can't be that, right?
Yeah, they would have to give us something about researchers being puzzled. Is it possible that researchers were puzzled? Yes, but it's not in the passage, so it's not something we can choose. C is a good example of must versus can. Based on the passage, can it be true that there were some questions that puzzled researchers? Sure, it's possible. It doesn't explicitly say that it's not. But for this to be a correct answer choice, it must be in there. So there has to be some mention of something that long puzzled researchers for this to be true. Okay. D, discuss evidence. Okay, that's pretty general, right? So discussing evidence, it sounds like, yeah, they discussed evidence, but let's see evidence of what? That has caused a long-standing belief to be revised.
First sentence says long believed, so.
Yeah, let me get a new color here. So what I like about this is that they are saying the same thing, but with slightly different wording. Typically, they're not going to be that nice to you where they give you the exact same wording to answer your question. What you'll have to look for is a rephrasing or a paraphrase. So long believed and a long-standing belief. Again, this is an easy question, so the match is pretty close, right? Pretty much identical. But what you're looking for is a restatement of, if we're looking for a long-standing belief, we find long believed, great. That's a good match. It's not identical, but it's similar, so that's good. Now, was there a revision in a long-standing belief?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an update, right? It wasn't a complete overturning, it was an update.
Right.
So we can call that a revision, yeah. And is there some evidence that did that? Yeah, this new info. Right? 4 critical genes governing circadian cycles have been found to be active in every tissue, not just SCNs. So this looks like a pretty good answer, right?
Mhm.
Now, just because we like D doesn't mean that we're not going to check E, but we want to make sure that E is not clearly, a better choice or doesn't look like it might also be a choice. So let's just give a look to E. Attempt to explain a commonly misunderstood biological phenomenon. I see some things in here that seem like pretty good matches. Now, it doesn't mean it's the right answer, but there are some things in here that are pretty good matches.
Well, so the commonly misunderstood part, right? A reader could be reading that first paragraph and then seeing the update kind of imply that originally it was not completely understood.
Right. Yeah, so what they're trying to get you to do is to get a little turned around from the commonly misunderstood thing, right? First of all, we don't know if it's commonly misunderstood. They have to give us some sense that a lot of people or a lot of scientists or something like that a lot of them misunderstood it. And again, it's not that it was necessarily a misunderstanding, it's that new data has changed our understanding.
Right.
But is it about a biological phenomenon? Yes. Is there some attempt to explain that? Yes. And so a lot of people can think that E looks like a good answer because parts of it are good. Okay. The passage mentions each of the following as a function regulated by the SCNs in some animals except. So these are really annoying questions. It's kind of like you have to answer 4 questions, not 1, right? Like we've got to find 4 of these, and then there's one that we don't find, and that's the answer. That's pretty annoying. It's also easy to forget that you're doing a question that's an except question. So you might forget what you're doing, say, oh, I saw activity level, think that's the answer, and then move on and forget that you're looking for what's not in the passage. So you really want to be careful with that. So we got to find 4 of them, right? Usually they will be clustered together, or at least some of them will be, so you can find several at once. So a function regulated by the SCNs. Where could we find, like, where should we look in the passage for that?
The beginning.
Yeah, in the first
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
So I found it on line, I guess 9, right above the 10. Yeah.
Okay, so we got a lot to mine here, right? So blood pressure, body temperature, activity level, alertness, and melatonin. Right, so then what we're left with, vision. So let's see why they put vision in there. What does it say about vision?
Because of the retina on this next sentence after that.
information, let's see, the human retina dedicated to transmitting information about light levels to the SCNs. So this is going in the opposite direction, right?
Mhm.
So we have some vision information that goes to SCNs instead of being controlled by SCNs. Good. All right. So I think what we should do now is skip ahead to a tougher one and see if we can push you guys a little bit here. I think we get into the mediums. This is a good one. Okay. It looks like it's question number 448. I'm not sure if that's the same numbering for you guys.
It's on page 360.
Okay. And is the passage Linda Kerber argued in the mid 1980s about the American Revolution?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, and let me know when you guys have read through the passage. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to try and do 448 and 449, and then we'll go through them together. Because I want you to really think about kind of breaking down those answer choices piece by piece and trying to locate the answers to the question. And let me know when you guys have answered those. Do all three of you have the 2021 GMAT, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see if I can, I might just buy the Kindle version then of that, just so that we don't have to play the page matchup game. Although I don't think the Kindle pages match the text pages. Okay. So the first thing I want to point out is what type of passage we're looking at. So there's a kind of history, sociology, social science type passage that there will be a criticism. And I'm not necessarily saying that the criticism means that it's wrong. Let's call it a critique. Let's do that. So it might be agreeing, it might be disagreeing, it might be partially agreeing, partially disagreeing, whatever. A critique of an idea.
Is it always a critique? Or generally a critique?
Well, critique is pretty broad in that it could be a, a reinforcement. It could be, it could be partially criticizing. It could be completely criticizing. I have seen one where, not to get too many levels, it is a critique of others' critiques. So it's defending an original idea from other critiques.
Okay.
That's why I wasn't quite sure how to answer your question without just making it more confusing. So you can critique an idea, you can critique others' critiques of an idea, and maybe someday we'll see a critique of a critique of a critique of an idea. But it's generally there's an idea, and then if the idea, if the author of the passage just agrees with it, that's boring, and there's not really much to read, right? Like, hey, so and so was right about everything. So there has to be some disagreement somewhere, right? So some sort of criticism somewhere. So you have a critique of an idea. Usually what they do is they present the idea. They might give a couple pieces of info that like support it, or they might say so-and-so supports it. So it might be literary scholars or this famous historian or something like that supports it. But then they're going to point out some problems. And then here's something where they might have like an update. So they might say the old theory is trash, we need a new one, but probably not. It'll probably be something a little more gentle than that, right? Like we need to update the theory. Here's the way in which we need to update it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can you see how it's not terribly different than the science one?
Or yeah.
There's a lot of like there are a couple different ways in a lot of different ways that people break these down. There's an I say, or they say I say. And the way they say I say is set up, it's just what you do is you give someone else's opinion about a matter and then you give your own. So if it's an old theory, you say, they have this old theory. I think this new theory is better. So that it kind of fits into the same thing. Another way to put it is you have your old idea and then you have a reason to shift or reason to update. And then you have the new idea. And as you can see, like they're not all terribly different. But if you're aware of this, it's not like every passage will very neatly fit perfectly in this box, but a shocking number of them will. And even when they don't fit perfectly, they often fit pretty well. And so it's just a nice way to have something that you can use to kind of break these down in a reasonable amount of time. So it's not just like some blob of text that you're trying to remember. Okay, so if we have a critique of an idea, well, how did I know that it's a kind of literary or historical criticism?
See dates.
Yep, and we talk about historical things, right? American Revolution. And when we look here, they already named someone. Linda Kerber argued in the mid-1980s. This sure sounds like we're about to give her theory, Linda Kerber's theory. And then it's very unlikely you're going to just read an entire passage that was like, Linda was right about everything. Because again, that's kind of boring and it doesn't give us much to work with. So we can already start to see that they say, I say, or another way to put it, a critique of an idea. You present the idea, maybe some support for it, then you show some problems and then you give an update for it, right? So I want you guys just on your own to try and do that for this passage. And can you guys kind of see how it fits? Oh, and I'll give away my other top secret idea. Ideology, thesis. Oh, and then they even mention educational historians. They mention historians, right? But words like ideology and thesis are pretty good giveaways too, that we're looking at that kind of history, sociology, idea, criticism. So what do you guys think? What's the idea that's being presented here?
Linda's saying that post-American Revolution was the big push for women to get educated. And then they're saying, yes, however, Thomas Woody found an exception from like a article in 1753 that they've been pushing for women's higher education prior to the revolution.
Yeah. So the original idea is Republican motherhood resulted in a surge of educational opportunities for women, and that was kind of the beginning, right? So like you said, and then, but now we have Thomas Woody's evidence that maybe it started before then, right? And where do we leave off? What's the like updated idea at the end? Because they don't say, therefore, Linda Kerber is a fraud and everything she said is wrong, right? They don't do that. What's the updated version?
Well, so essentially, so Linda Kerber kind of says like it all started because of the revolution and that there was the push to educate women. But as you get towards like sort of what Thomas Woody was saying, it was that is true, but in fact, it actually started before. So I guess the argument is, yeah, there was a push, but it was more so enhanced by the revolution rather than started because of it.
Yeah. May have accelerated, right? Good. Now they do slip in one more little idea that we should that we should notice, because potentially they could sneak in a question here. Historians' reliance on Kerber's Republican motherhood thesis may have obscured the presence of these trends, making it difficult to determine to what extent the revolution really changed women's lives. So they put in like a consequence of underestimating what happened before the revolution might have made the study a little bit biased. And so we just want to notice that. They might ask us a question about it, they might not. We just want to be ready for that little extra thing at the end. So we could say it like caused a problem. Okay, so now we're looking at answer choices. We feel like we have a pretty good idea of what the passage is about. According to the passage, Kerber maintained that which of the following led to an increase in educational opportunities for women in the US? What about A, an unprecedented demand by women for greater educational opportunities? What do you guys think about this one? Did I see some head shaking? Okay, why might someone pick this one? I agree with you guys though, by the way. Because you see this and you go, yeah, women should be demanding greater educational opportunities, right? This is very much a should type of answer, where if you're not sure what the answer is, you haven't found it yet, but you're reading A, you're like, well, that makes sense. They totally should. That's a
Right.
trap, right? It's not in the passage. Maybe we want it to be true, and maybe it was true, but it's not in the passage. Okay, what about B? A new political ideology calling for equality of opportunity between men and women in all aspects of life.
But they didn't really talk about that.
There's something in here that's right though, and then they make it wrong. They put in something, and so there's an important trap in here. This goes way too far. What we were looking at is an increase in educational opportunities for women. It doesn't mean equality of opportunities for women. It's like a difference of this going to like that, right? It's not going to equality. It's going from this to this. So they're hoping you say, okay, equality, well, we're getting closer to it, but it's not complete equality. Less inequality would be a correct way to state that, right? And it's not in all aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
So the sentiment for B is correct. It goes too far though.
I guess the way, when I was kind of crossing that one off, I always go with the assumption that if it doesn't really state it in the paragraph, it probably isn't the right answer, right? So,
Yeah.
Of life, you only read about education, right? That's the only thing that touches it. So that's how I was able to cross that one off.
Right. So you said, hey, I see education. I don't see all aspects of life. Right on. That's exactly right. Okay, a belief that the American educational system could be reformed only if women participated more fully in that system. What do you guys think about that?
It's close, but not.
Yeah, sort of like what Ramon said, like I didn't see that in, like the sentiment was kind of there, but what I read in the first paragraph was talking about how motherhood pushes your sons to be the leaders of this new country, this new republic that you're creating.
Yeah, this isn't like super women and men are equal
Yeah.
type of thinking, right? Like there's still some I guess you could say caveman type opinion in here. What I want to point out is that C and A are very similar. They are things that we think are true and that should be happening, but are not in the passage, right? American educational system could be reformed only if women participated more fully in that system. That makes sense, right? Like we feel like, okay, in real life, that's a very reasonable statement, not in the passage. Okay. D, a belief that women needed to be educated. Okay, so far so good, right? They all say that though, pretty much. If they were to contribute to the success of the nation's new form of government. What do you guys think about this?
That was my answer.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You guys like that one, right? Couldn't find any problems with it. I agree. What about E?
It's a roundabout way to the answer, but yeah, I think that's where it's hard to select that one. It'd be that it's not direct, it's more roundabout.
Yeah. So actually let's go and let's dig into that one a little bit more. So women need to be educated. Yeah, okay. I think that's pretty clearly going on in the passage. If they were to contribute, okay, so contributing, okay, fine. The success of the nation's new form of government. Now that's something specific we can check, right? Resulted in a surge of educational opportunities for women in the US. Okay, fine. Kerber maintained that the leaders of the new nation, oh, it looks like we might be in the right spot, right? Wanted women to be educated in order to raise politically virtuous sons. Is that a way to contribute to the success? Yes. Right? Not the most direct way, and a pretty kind of, sexist way to do that is the only way they can be valuable is what they do for men. But it is a rephrasing of the statement in the passage, right? So contribute to the success of the nation's new form of government, and this is how they could do it. Okay. Why is E not the answer? A recognition that women needed to be educated. That seems a lot like D so far, right? They're indistinguishable so far. If they were to take an active role in the nation's schools and churches.
It doesn't mention anything about them being in churches or schools.
Yeah. Now, one thing that can happen, and it sounds like none of you guys fell for it, so that's great. If you read an answer choice that sounds really good early on, your brain will start to get lazy and not want to check the very end. And so they can sneak one by you. A recognition that women needed to be educated if they were to take an active role in the nations. So far, this actually sounds exactly like the right answer, right? And then you just go schools and churches. Yeah, whatever. Women were involved in schools and churches. I got to go. I have to go on to the next question. I'm under a time rush, whatever. So you really want to train yourself to check that, right? Schools and churches, no way. That's not what's in here. And if you notice, when they wrote this, they probably wrote D and then copied it over for E, slightly changed the wording, and then just changed the last two words, right? And so that's the reason they did that is that tends to work. Like that's a trick that people will tend to fall for. And so it's just something you want to be aware of. Okay, according to the passage, within the field of educational history, Thomas Woody's 1929 work was, so where are we going to find an answer to this?
In the second passage or in the second paragraph.
Yeah. How would we know? Let's say that the passage was longer than this. It's not super long, but let's say that it was a little bit longer. I would look for 1929 Thomas Woody, right? Potentially educational history, but definitely 1929 and Thomas Woody. Okay, and so he's not mentioned until around here. So Thomas Woody's 1929 work was what within the field of educational history? Well, let's see what it says. What do you guys think it says?
That Thomas Woody's work, so it's contradicting, it's being the antithesis to Kerber's work, right? So Thomas Woody is a notable exception, and that's the kind of the modification of the paragraph saying, or the sentence saying, prior to Kerber's work, educational historians barely mention women and girls, essentially saying, except Thomas Woody. So he wasn't in the norm, per se.
Yeah, exactly. He was exceptional because he mentioned women and girls. Good. All right, so what about our answer choices then?
That's not it.
What do we think about A? Was it innovative? Maybe. It seems kind of innovative, or at least not commonplace, right? But is it because it relied on newspaper advertisements?
No.
I don't think so, right? What else? What about B? Was it exceptional? It does say exceptional. Does that mean it's the answer? We don't have to check the rest of the answer choice? Right? We found a word match. We're done, right? No, we're not. Why? It concentrated on the period before the American Revolution. That's not what was the notable exception, right? Okay, what else? What about C? Unusual in that it focused on educational attitudes rather than educational practices.
No, not for me at least.
Yeah, again, we found what was the exception about it, right? It focused on women and girls. So let's skip ahead to E. Atypical. Okay, is that a synonym for exceptional? Yes. It examined the education of girls. The educational historians barely mentioned women and girls. That's a pretty straight match, right? We're just finding a rephrasing. And then if we look through C, unusual in that it focused on educational attitudes versus practices, no. Controversial in its claims regarding educational opportunities for boys, no. It doesn't address boys, just girls, right? Women and girls.
So I have like a question about an assumption. So it almost seems, and you see that in the previous question, and I've seen it before. It almost wants you to like, so kind of like you said on some A, relied on newspaper advertisements as evidence. I see that it's a trick, and the reason they use that kind of last bit of the sentence is because that is literally stated like right next to it. It's like a line or two away.
Yeah.
Notice that a lot of questions will have that trick where they'll say something that was said 2-3 lines down from where the answer is, almost like it's trying to trick you. And it almost seems like if it was like directly in the passage, it's almost never the right answer.
I'll put it this way: when it's too obvious, it's probably a trap. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you want to think like they're not going to give you a question that you can accidentally get right.
Yeah, there's no gimmies, right? Yeah.
Right. Another way to put it is, let's say that they gave you the test, but it was in like German and you don't speak German. If you could just match words, like, those super long German words where they're like, like 35 words long. If you just match those to the answer choice, from the text to the answer choice, and you could get answers right that way, that would be a terrible question, right? It's not a test of your understanding. And so they're not going to give it to you that easy, where you can just match words. So you got to do some sort of decoding usually, at least synonym stuff. But there are ways to make it easier.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update our syllabus a little bit. But for now, what I would like you guys to do before Thursday is I want you to practice the reading comprehension. And I want you to practice doing it the way that we talked about, where you try to figure out the big picture stuff about the passage you're reading. The kind of old idea, new evidence, new idea, or updated idea, and see if you can apply that. Some passages it'll apply perfectly, some it'll apply imperfectly. Sometimes it'll be a real struggle, but try to practice applying that. Try to break down these answer choices the way we talked about. And so I want you guys to do, what I would like you to do is the reading comprehension in here. And I think honestly, you guys are good enough to where you don't need to worry about the easy reading comprehension. So let's see where the medium starts. Let's see, 544. So in the book I have here, in Winters versus United States in 1908, the Supreme Court held that the right to use water is flowing through an adjacent. So that's where the medium starts. And in my book, it's questions 544 to 591. I would like for you guys to do the medium difficulty set, and if you can, as much of the hard difficulty as well. And we will go over those together. So any of the ones that gave you trouble, mark those up. And if you could, before we start, just so that I can kind of organize, just in an email, send to me the questions and the page numbers of the ones you want to go over. And we'll have, since there's only 3 of you guys, we'll have time to go through a ton of them. And I'm sure that you'll have similar questions because, hard questions are hard questions. So the ones that give one of you trouble likely will give the other trouble as well. In addition to that, I would like you guys to go through the math review. In my book, it's chapter 3, and it's about 70 something pages. It's not all problems. Some of it is like definitions, like an integer is a whole number, including negatives and 0. Go through it. If you can't get through all of it by Thursday, that's totally fine. But go through a part of it because I want you guys to get through all of it eventually. And then that'll give us a sense of like which math concepts we want to spend more time on. And it'll also prepare you for when we start doing the quant reasoning sections. But for now, I would say if you have to prioritize, I would prioritize the reading comprehension because I want you guys to really get that down so that in the future when you're doing them, you feel like even if you don't get all of them right, you know what you're doing and you know how to break them down. Okay?
All right.
Okay. Well, good job, everyone. I'll put the notes up in our class documents, and I will send you guys the video, a link to the video, and then also the target test prep PDF for the math formulas. Okay?
Cool.
All right.
All right. Have a good
Thanks,
night,
guys.
everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.